Chapter 2.9 Predator and Prey. Zoto turned away from Retta, and she pulled at the vines that bound her. All her strength amounted to nothing. She yanked, tugged, and pulled, but the vines were like an immovable tree. Retta panicked, rushing to pry herself free, looked up, and saw Zoto disappear into the dark of the night. "Zoto!" she screamed, to no response. He's really going to do it. She drew her sheathed laser dagger, pointed it to her bindings, and let it ignite. Its red beam curled along the blade, and she sliced through the roots with a searing sizzle. One after another, she split tendril after tendril, digging for the knot that had set her ankles free. Come on, come on! With a last, satisfying snap, her foot broke free. She kicked off her bindings and ran around the temple, but Zoto was already gone. The temple's entrance was sealed shut, and Retta only had one other place to look for him: his shack. She kept her knife drawn by her side, and its light illuminated her path in red. It gave her just the light she needed, but also made her easy to see. She couldn't shake the feeling that someone, or something, was watching her. She felt like prey, aimlessly wandering in this dark jungle at night. Strange bird calls rattled in the wind, leaves rustled up above, and stalking eyes followed from the shadows. Retta was used to hungry stares on the streets of Earth, but this was a different beast. She had no idea what creature could come, what beast it could be, or what danger lurked on the threshold of the unseen. The Baton confirmed her anxious premonitions. Nestled in her jacket beside her heart, the Baton was ice cold. A single touch sent shivers up her fingers and goosebumps up her skin. Her fingertips stuck to its surface like frigid metal in winter, an unnatural coldness for a so-called stick. Her body was tense. Her palms were sweaty, and when she reached Zoto's home, she knew something was wrong. She delicately parted the curtain blocking the door and whispered, "Zoto? You in here?" There was no response. But from around his shack, coming from the back, she heard a nigh imperceptible creak, a footstep, and one that she knew wasn't Zoto's. She paused, and so too did the sound. "Baton," a voice, mangled and horrible, said in her head. The sound was not a sound at all. Retta heard it surrounding her, inside her, ethereally within her, not like a sound at all, but rather like a thought. What the hell was that? Retta thought, and at her chest she felt a slight burn. She looked, and from her jacket the Baton glowed with a soft, red color. "Baton!" The voice was violent, louder, and closer. The earlier chill that ran up Retta's spine surged through her again. She looked up, and peeking around Zoto's home was someone. Someone following her. Her stalker was in plain sight. Retta slid into Zoto's home, dodged confrontation, and felt her heart ignite. It thumped in her chest with a surging, beating pulse. She was right. Someone was following her, and she didn't know who. She didn't know why. She didn't know this planet. She didn't know her escape. All she knew was that they were coming. She recoiled around the corner, pressed her back to the wall, and controlled her breaths. Her eyes went wide as she breathed in through her nose and slowly released through her mouth, betraying the urgency and adrenaline that coursed through her body. Now was not the time to lose it, she thought to herself, her mind leading a coup against her adrenaline-spiked heart. Focus. The steps came closer. They were masked, but still loud. They're big, she thought, and drew her knife by her side, the laser off and the blade hidden. She steeled herself, ready for their approach. The footsteps stopped. Silence. Retta waited in anticipation. Sweat dripped down her face, ran along the skin of her temple, and she bore it no mind. Her body was so tense she hardly registered her sweat's cool touch. Her lungs felt tight, her chest heavy, and each breath was a labored attempt to silently breathe so her stalker wouldn't hear. The silence lingered. It was prolonged, yet Retta felt the threat wasn't gone. It was here. It was waiting. But the darkness was overwhelming. She couldn't see anything, even as she tilted her head ever so slightly, hardly enough to poke out an eye. Only the black of night returned her gaze. Are they gone? Retta wondered. Should I run? She fastened her grip to her knife, drew it from her side, and in front of her, slowly ignited its red light. Greeting her from thin air in the darkness was a masked figure, face to face, staring her in the eye. Oh shit, she thought, and in an instant the figure batted her dagger from her hand. It skittered against the ground and slid away as the laser's edge shut off and the blade disappeared into the dark of night. Retta kicked the figure away, shoving them back in panic, and they stumbled backwards, bracing themselves against the door frame. They were big. Their body and draping cloak blocked her escape and gave Retta little time. They already bounced back and lunged to grab her. Retta was backed into Zoto's tiny hut. She dodged back, juked to the side, and narrowly avoided their grasp. But the shack was so tight that even with the slightest step, she was pinned to another wall. The figure rammed their shoulder into her, slammed her into the wall, and knocked the wind out of Red. The entire shack shuddered, and clay pots fell and shattered to the ground. Red's assailant gripped her neck. Their large, rough hands pressed against her throat and squeezed the life out of her. She gagged, clawing and writhing, unable to breathe, as she stared into the black, lifeless eyes of her assailant's tribal mask, hiding their face. Oh God. Her strength escaped her as life left her lungs. Her strength was dwindling. Retta fruitlessly slammed her fist into her assailant, and they barely flinched. She kicked and kicked, driving her foot into their shin and her knee into their gut, and they hardly winced. Their murderous intent was insatiable. She felt it. It was a burning, raging, red-hot desire. It was all-consuming, like a supernova, like a self-inflicted explosion ready to dismantle and destroy with singularly focused fury. The rage was bright red, and as Retta felt her last breaths, she saw it. Its bright, harrowing, deathly glow radiated from her chest. A light emanated from her jacket, and harrowing shadows were cast against her assailant's tribal mask. The baton. It was the baton, glowing again, and it burned. It burned red-hot, searing the flesh at Retta's chest with the intensity of a star, and it caught her assailant's attention. They looked down, and for a moment Retta saw the glint of the baton in her assailant's eyes. Yes, that's what they wanted. The baton, and they were willing to kill for it. Retta retched, coughing bloody sputum, and spit it into her assailant's eyes. They recoiled, caught off guard, and loosened their grip. It was all she needed. Retta gasped for air, reached into her jacket pocket, and pulled out the burning, searing, red-hot baton. With its glint in her assailant's eyes, she shoved it through their mask and stabbed it through their eye socket. The sizzle, the smell, and the smoke of burnt flesh billowed from the mask as the figure recoiled back, screaming in agony as they dropped Retta from their death grip. She gagged, coughing blood as she wheezed for air, stumbling to her feet as stars dotted her vision. She was weak, her head was light, and her body was heavy, but she precariously balanced and braced herself against the wall to get to her feet. She wasted little time. The assailant was rising, recoiling, and returning to their murderous intent. They crawled towards Retta, lunged at her feet, and grabbed her ankle. She kicked him, once in the jaw, twice in the face, and a third boot to his mask to release his grip. Retta twisted and ran, stumbling to stay upright, colliding with the doorframe as she rushed to escape. There was no time to look back. No time at all. She had to run. Just run. Run until her legs gave out. Run until her lungs lacked air. Run until her muscles ached, her chest tightened, and her heart pounded. And she did just that. Ran until there was no run left in her. When she turned back, there was nothing. Nothing but the all-encompassing darkness of the night. She caught her breath, her lungs burning as the air passed through her raw throat. Retta looked to the baton, covered with spots of red blood and no longer glowing red. It was a sign the threat was over. For now. She needed to get off that planet. Red had no idea who her assailant was or when they'd appear again. The only thing she knew was that it wasn't Zoto. Her assailant was too large and too strong to be the polite forest boy. Retta still wanted to find Zoto. They both needed to get off planet, her to escape her assailant, and him to escape the... From a distance, Retta saw a light ignite. Then another. In a line, the firefly lanterns illuminated, coming towards her and then streaming past her. She turned around and saw the temple that was obscured by night now illuminated by the fireflies. The temple was awake. The face changed and the mouth opened. The ceremony had begun. There was no time for rest. Retta looked behind her, confirming her assailant hadn't trailed her, but there was no trace of them. She ran to the temple, hoping to see Zoto, and instead saw a procession of guards, clad in their thick, bark-hide armor and wooden spears, marching in a line out from the temple's mouth. At their center was Vickery, adorned in white robes and sashed with golden vines. Vickery was the first to speak, as her guards saw Retta and halted, protecting Vickery at the center. "Oh, it's you," Vickery said, with a noted absence of her original pleasantries. "And I see you're still not ready for the baton," she finished, disdainfully noticing the baton still in Retta's hand. Retta bit her tongue. She had less than kind words to say, but she needed the sage's help. "Vickery, someone assaulted me." Her eyebrows perked up from her expressionless face, frozen in stone with age. "Who?" I don't know. Someone with one of your masks." "None of our people would do that," she said. "I wonder if it was someone pretending to be her people," Retta thought. "But our guards will protect you." The procession of soldiers nodded, and then looked to Vickery. "As surprised as I am that the baton chose you, you are still its holder. We owe it to Celeste to protect you." "Thank you, Vickery. Do you know where Zoto is?" She had to hide her intention of breaking him free. "Of course. Follow me." Vickery nodded, and the procession marched forward. Retta fell in lockstep with Vickery, moving with them through the town, where the streets were prepared for celebration, yet not a soul was to be found. "Where is everyone?" Retta asked. "Already at the ceremony. We shall be the last party there." "Shit," Retta thought. "That's a problem." "Do you have any idea who assaulted you?" Vickery asked. "No, it was a blur." I doubt it was one of us." Retta found it convenient how quickly Vickery exonerated her own people. "Perhaps ask Jimbo if he's seen any outsiders." "Okay, thank you." Any outsiders, Retta thought. The only other outsider here besides me is Tobias.